I was born into a family that valued tradition and strict obedience to their beliefs. My parents were no exception, and they made sure to instill their principles in me from a young age. Growing up, I always felt like the odd one out among my peers, as my parents kept me on a tight leash and never allowed me to do anything they deemed inappropriate or rebellious as I grew older. I began to realize just how suffocating their parenting style was. I yearned for freedom and independence, but my parents would have none of it. They saw me as their property, something to be molded and controlled to fit their ideals. Things came to a head when I turned 20. I had fallen in love with someone outside of our community, and my parents were furious. They accused me of betraying them and their values, and in their rage, they disowned me. Just like that. I was cast out of the family I had known my entire life. The pain of being rejected by my own parents was indescribable. I felt lost and alone, like I had no place in the world. But I also felt a sense of relief knowing that I was finally free to live my life on my own terms. It was a bittersweet feeling, but it was better than being suffocated by my parents' expectations. Years went by and I built a life for myself outside of my family. I found a job I loved, made friends who accepted me for who I was, and eventually met someone who loved me unconditionally. My first relationship ended on mutual terms. I was grateful that he had come into my life and helped me after my family disowned me. For a while, I was happy and content, and I thought I had left my past behind me. But then, out of nowhere, my parents resurfaced in my life. I heard a knock at the door, and when I opened it, I was stunned to see my parents standing there. I don't know how they found out where I lived. They looked older and more frail than I remembered, but I didn't feel any sense of warmth or nostalgia. Instead, I felt a knot forming in my stomach. They didn't wait for me to invite them inside before pushing past me and making themselves at home. They acted like they had every right to be there, like they had never done anything wrong. I tried to keep my cool and be polite, but inside I was seething. How dare they show up after all these years and demand my attention as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't thrown me out of their lives when I needed them most. I forced a smile and asked what they wanted, hoping they would quickly state their business and leave, but they didn't. They rambled on about their health problems and financial struggles as if I was supposed to fix everything for them. They didn't even ask how I was doing or how I managed to survive without their help. It was clear to me that they were entitled, and I couldn't believe their audacity. They had treated me like garbage when I was young, and now they thought they could waltz back into my life and make demands? No way. I stood my ground and refused to give in to their demands. They eventually left, but not before making it clear that they expected me to take care of them. I was left feeling angry and bitter, but also relieved that they were gone. I didn't want them in my life again. That encounter left me shaken, but it also lit a fire within me. I realized that I couldn't let them control my life again, not after everything they had put me through. As the days passed, the calls from my parents became more frequent and insistent. They would call me at all hours of the day and night, leaving voicemails that ranged from pleading to demanding. At first, I tried to ignore them, but their persistence wore me down. They wanted me to take care of them, to provide them with a place to live, and to take care of their every need. They were entitled and acted as if it were my responsibility to take care of them, even after they had disowned me when I was young. It was as if they had conveniently forgotten all the years they had spent ignoring me and all the times they had chosen to turn a blind eye to my struggles. Their phone calls and messages were a constant reminder of the hurt they had caused me, and I found myself becoming angrier and more frustrated with each passing day. Eventually, I knew I had to do something, and so I decided to take action. It was time to make them face the consequences of their actions. I decided to sue them for emotional distress, to hold them accountable for the pain and suffering they had caused me. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew it was the right one. I couldn't let them continue to act as if they had done nothing wrong, as if they were entitled to my time and attention. I knew I couldn't let them do that to me again, so I decided to take legal action and sue them for the emotional distress they had caused me. I knew I had to do it for my own sanity. As I began the legal process, I couldn't help but feel a sense of empowerment. For so many years, I had felt powerless in the face of my parents' rejection and neglect. But now, I was taking control of my life and my future. I was showing them that I wouldn't be bullied or intimidated into doing something that wasn't my responsibility. The process was long and stressful, but I was determined to see it through. My lawyer and I compiled all the evidence we had, including messages and recordings of the conversations I had with my parents. We filed the lawsuit and waited for the court date. When the day of the trial finally arrived, I was nervous, but also relieved that I could finally confront my parents in a safe and controlled environment. They looked shocked and ashamed, not of themselves, but of me, when they saw me in the courtroom, but I didn't let their expressions sway me. My lawyer presented our case and showed how my parents had caused me emotional distress by disowning me and then demanding my help years later. Their entitled behavior had caused me significant pain and trauma, and I deserved compensation for it. As my parents sat in silence, I spoke directly to the judge and explained how their actions had affected me. I didn't hold back, and I made it clear that I would never allow them to hurt me again. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor, and my parents were ordered to pay a settlement for emotional distress they had caused me. It wasn't about the money, though. It was about holding them accountable for their actions and getting closure for myself. After the trial, my parents tried to reach out to me again, but I was done with them. I had closure, and I didn't need their apologies or attempts to reconcile. I had finally stood up for myself and taken control of my life. Update 1. A few months later, life was much better. I had managed to move on and had found a new sense of peace in my life. However, there were still some family members who tried to reach out to me and accused me of being heartless for suing my parents. They didn't understand the years of pain and trauma that I had gone through because of their actions. One day, I received a call from one of my cousins who started accusing me of being selfish and not taking care of my parents. I was taken aback by her words and tried to explain to her why I had made the decision to sue my parents, but she refused to listen and continued to berate me. That's when I finally snapped. I told her that she had no idea what I had gone through, and that her judgmental attitude was not welcome in my life. I reminded her that my parents had disowned me when I needed them the most, and that I had every right to protect myself from further emotional harm. I reminded her that they only came back into my life when they needed something. I told her that I was the one who had to suffer the emotional distress of being abandoned, and yet they expected me to take care of them in their old age. I made it clear that I had moved on from my parents and that their actions had consequences. It wasn't easy to cut off family members, but I knew that I had to prioritize my own well-being over their options. In the end, the lawsuit was settled in my favor, so it should be clear who the offenders were. NTA. It's disgusting that parents would choose to disown their own child, especially at such a young age. Parents are supposed to be a source of love, support, and guidance in the child's life, not the cause of emotional distress and turmoil. What kind of parenting is that? It's truly appalling to hear about the way OP's parents treated them as a child. No child deserves to be disowned by their parents for any reason, let alone something as trivial as their choice of partner. It's clear that the parents have a lot to answer for and should be held accountable for the trauma they inflicted on their child. Their sense of entitlement and the audacity to demand care after all they've done is beyond belief. NTA. I can't believe the level of entitlement her parents had when they showed up at her doorstep, expecting her to take care of them after years of abandonment. It's absolutely outrageous and shows a complete lack of consideration for her feelings and experiences. It's clear that the parenting style of OP's parents was deeply flawed, as evidenced by their decision to disown her and then demand her support years later. It's important to parents to remember that they have a responsibility to care and support their children, not to use them as emotional punching bags or expect them to fulfill their needs without regard for the impact on their child's well-being. Next story. My sister has been living with me for close to a year along with her 6-year-old son. She recently became homeless after what I'm going to be nice and just call a series of bad choices. And since no one else would take her or her kid in, I decided to let them live with me until she can get back on her feet. Now, I'm a reasonable person. I only have a few rules, mainly don't touch my shit. Just respect my personal space and you're golden. That's not an unreasonable rule, right? Well, unfortunately, my sister just refuses to discipline her kid. Every day is just constant tantrums and fits, and any attempt I make to set him straight gets my sister up in arms about how he can't help it. But I try my best to bear with it because I know these two have literally nowhere else to go. Recently as well, I finally built my own gaming PC after months of work and thousands of dollars spent, and I was beyond thrilled it came out so well. Of course, I immediately told my nephew not to touch it and that he is under no circumstances allowed near. He just about breaks everything else, so I don't think I'm being harsh here in saying I don't want him near it. I tell my sister as well to keep him away from it, but she just says I shouldn't bully him. Cut to a few days ago, and he's throwing yet another tantrum because he wants to play Minecraft on my PC. I, of course, tell him no, but my sister is getting on my case about how it's not fair I get to be the only one to play it. I don't have the time to deal with this. I need to run errands, but I'm hoping in vain my sister can control him for once. The actual area with my PC set up is an open room with no door. Think an office space, but with figurines and such. So it's not like I can lock it off like I could in my room. Not even asking them to come with me worked since my sister just refused and my nephew, screaming and crying, certainly isn't something I want to deal with when shopping. Come time I return, I immediately check to see if the PC is safe, and what I find is broken glass everywhere. My monitor's on the floor, and the PC tower practically in pieces. I'm beyond fuming now and confront my sister about what happened. She doesn't even try to hide it. She just says she let him on, but couldn't figure out how to launch Minecraft. And when my nephew got mad, he couldn't play. He had a meltdown. I, of course, demand she cover the cost to repair, but she says it's my fault for not letting him play and that she doesn't owe me anything. By this point, I had enough and packed up all the things and told them to get out or else I'm calling the police. She reluctantly left before snipping, "I hope you're happy," under her breath. Over the next few days, I'm bombarded with texts and voicemails from her, calling me a bad brother and that it's my fault they're homeless. AITA? Edit. Wow, he blew up. To answer some frequently asked questions. I am not aware if my nephew is on the spectrum. My sister flat out refuses to get him tested. which is a whole different can of worms that would take forever to get into. About an hour or so after kicking them out, I called and offered to send directions to the nearest shelter. I don't want them being homeless, but I sure as hell don't want them in my house either. Plenty of people asked why I had it built in the office at all and why I didn't keep the PC itself locked away. I had it all planned out long before those two moved in. It's only recently that I was able to, and unfortunately, with all the money I had sunk in and time I spent planning, just holding off until they were out was not an option. It's such a pain to set it up and then keeping it locked away whenever I'm out would be way too much of a hassle. NTA, I'm starting to understand what some of your sister's bad decisions might have been. The rules you set up were completely reasonable, especially since you were letting her stay there as a favor. One of the most basic things she could do is to keep her kid under control. She brought this entirely on herself. And despite what she said, none of this is your fault. And she is going to continue to be homeless and whatnot until she takes responsibility for her own choices. NTA, it sounds like your sister is still making a lot of bad choices. She has nowhere to go and still insists you cave to her and her children's demands. She has no respect for you or your possessions, and no respect for herself or her child. Many here will say kicking her out is too harsh as she has nowhere else to go. But she should have considered that before she acted like her kid can do anything in your home that you nicely opened up to them. Her selfishness and ingratitude are in full display. Her non-existent parenting style also shows. She will now learn the hard way what happens when you are selfish and immature. Next story. I, 35, male, bought a new home a couple of years ago. Instead of selling my old house, I decided to rent it out instead. My current tenants have been there for about 18 months, and for the most part, I haven't had any problems with them. We recently had a large snowstorm in our area, about 20 inches in a 3-day period. As part of the rental agreement, I pay a plow service to clear the driveway and parking area of my rental property after large storms. Other times, I just go over there with my own snowblower and take care of it. I ask my tenants to move their cars out of the parking area and driveways so that the plow can maneuver properly and move the snow safely. My tenants are a family and they have 3 to 4 cars, depending on if their oldest is staying with them or not. She's in college nearby and sometimes stays at home instead of at school. I always give 48-hour notice when I schedule the plow truck to come so that my tenants have ample notice and time to move their cars. I sent an email to them notifying them of the date and time that the plow truck was scheduled to be at the house, but I got no reply. So I sent a text but also got no response. I tried calling but got no answer, so I left a message but didn't hear back. The day the plow truck was scheduled, I got a call from the driver saying that he can't plow the snow because there are too many cars in the way. I went over there and there were 5 cars, 2 of which I didn't recognize. The driver said he had knocked on the door, but no one answered. I tried too, but no one was home. I tried calling again, but no answer. I eventually had to tell the driver to leave because he had other jobs to do. I sent another email saying that they have 24 hours to move their vehicles or they will be towed so the snow can be removed. I got no response to that email either. The next day, I went to the house again and tried calling one last time, but no answer. So I called a tow truck and had all 5 cars towed and got the plow truck to clear the snow. The next day, I finally got a call back from my tenant. He said they were out of state visiting family for the holidays and didn't have cell service or internet access. He asked if I could wait on removing the snow until they got back in a couple of days. I had to tell him that their cars had already been towed. He was not happy. There was a string of expletives about how I had no right to tow their cars and that 2 of the cars were family members who were traveling with them. I advised him to reread the rental agreement regarding parking and snow removal because I was completely within my rights to remove cars after giving proper advance notice. He let loose with a string of expletives that would make a sailor blush and threatened to sue me for damages. I once again told him to review the lease, but he told me to frick off and hung up. I do feel bad, but there are city ordinances about snow removal that I need to adhere to as the homeowner. NTA. If it's in the lease and as a homeowner there are requirements for snow removal, you have to adhere to or be at risk of fines by the city. Then what the hell are you supposed to do? Leave the snow and make them pay the fines? There's no good answer to this. Given they've lived there long enough to have gone through this before, they could have tried to be prepared to have someone come and move the cars, if they weren't there, or keep the cars somewhere else. It's not your fault they weren't reachable for days. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relations.